We are live. Hello, world. So today I've got a special guest. His name's Yilun, but the pronunciation's Elon, like Elon Musk. So Elon, thank you for joining us on the channel.
Oh, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's purely coincidental. You get to talk to Elon today, but just lot dumber and poor Elon.
Very humble Elon. So our topic today is actually China, car market in China. China is the world's largest car market by far. We sell about 26 million cars per year in China. That's compared to 15 million in the United States. So about 70% bigger than US. And actually almost 60% of all the world's EVs are sold in China. So that makes China by far a very important market, not just for Tesla, but the entire automotive industry. So today we've got Elon here to talk about some misconceptions about the car market in China. He's done some research in a recent Twitter thread. We're also going to talk a little bit more about Tesla in China. You see the narrative is going up and down for Tesla in China. Last quarter, like not so good. This quarter, suddenly so good. And also what he thinks the future of the car industry could be like in China. So that's really our topic today. You see Elon here, we'll talk about Tesla and a lot more. So welcome to the channel, Elon. Great having you here for the first time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. But before we jump into it, I'm just there's some background noise. I'm just gonna like close one of the doors in the
Sure.
bedroom real quick.
For everyone else in the live stream, hello, hello. How are you? Hello back to you as well. If any of you have any questions anytime, just share in the live stream chat. If we miss it, let us know. And for anyone watching this after the live recording, good seeing you as well. So welcome back, Elon. For those who don't know you yet, tell us about yourself.
Yeah. Well, hello everyone. I'm Elon. I'm in the U.S. So have worked in automotive retail and EV space for the last 10 years, building digital products for various different companies. But probably the most relevant one for this group is probably Rivian. I was there building their, essentially from 0 to 1, a lot of the sales and delivery infrastructure. And certainly a big passionate fan of EVs, and certainly Tesla is one of the OGs in this space. But because of my background and being Chinese, and so like certainly also have paid attention to a lot in the Chinese EV market as well. So yeah, so been following it for the last few years, and only started writing about it last month, and Darren reached out. So really happy to share.
That's very cool. You're the first Rivian alumni I'm speaking with. I've never seen a Rivian live before because they clearly don't have it in Asia Pacific yet. Hopefully, I get to see one in California when we visit in June. I hear there are more right now.
Oh yeah, they're starting to be much more available. You'll definitely see one in California for sure.
Very nice.
Yeah. So no, they're phenomenal. They're phenomenal vehicles, and I don't in in many ways. I think it's like they have tried to do something that is just much more different than I think what Tesla is doing, which is not only are they like, hey, we want to build a battery electric vehicle, but we want to do something that's like also just like, like Elon talks about, like, I don't care about brand, everything's about the product. Whereas like Rivian very much it is about that lifestyle brand. So I think they're taking a little bit of a different approach to kind of every to Tesla in that way. But they got some challenges right now, but I'm sure they're working diligently through everything. So.
That is very cool. Yes, every company has its challenges. Elon Musk often says, prototypes are easy,
That's
manufacturing
right.
is freaking hard.
Yeah, that's right.
So recently, Elon, you've put together a Twitter thread specifically on China. You got a lot of historical insurance data in China, and you've actually got some insights there. It is a pretty long trade, and I can share some visuals to talk through it. But if you could just walk us through the audience, like what were some highlights for you specifically?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Certainly, so essentially the origin behind this is like as basically I'm following the kind of some of these sort of companies, and through essentially I ended up getting in touch with like over the years with a number of folks that work at these OEMs or work at like various consulting firms that cover the space in China. So certainly have developed basically a really good relationship with them, and so like there's opportunities like uh, like I just mentioned, it's like, oh, it would be kind of cool to kind of get a full exposure into like what the market shares and of every single vehicle is, and kind of do a much deeper dive. And he's like, oh, actually, I can give you that data. And it's like,
Mm,
oh yeah, I would love to take a look at it. So and that's sort of the genesis of all this. I think that probably the biggest my two biggest takeaway, I think it's like high level overall is one, just like how quickly things change in China.
mm,
So like there was a lot of things that was at one point true, but it just like it's not true anymore. And then that was like surprising to me. And I think I had an example for BMWs in there. And then I think the second thing is like because I still live in the US, yeah, in this example, it's like everybody's like, oh, BMW is really slow with the EVs. Like they're like recently, they're like 10% of their sales in China are EVs. So that's actually pretty good for
yeah,
especially for a premium automaker. And then same thing like Volkswagen. It's like you thought they were like crushing it, like with the IDs. Actually, in China, they're not. Like it's been going the other way, because like their product is just not competitive enough in the market. So
mm,
so I think those are kind of like are just examples of that. And then I think the other thing was just like because I live in the U.S., I apply a lot of mental models I had in the U.S. to China, like whether consciously or unconsciously. It's just like that's just the way it is. And oftentimes like these are two very different countries. And then I think that like for like premium segment, oftentimes like we in the US, it's like you start with the premium segment first, and then you cost down everything, you do the mass market, and then cheaper cars, and then the 25,000 sort of like model whatever Q, for example. It's like the holy grail that like everybody at Tesla is like dying for in the
that's
next
right.
gen platform. But like I think the actually in China it's the opposite. Like in the low end, there's actually a ton of choice. Whereas like on the high end, there's actually a lot less choice than you think.
That's right. You are actually revealing some very interesting stats showing that. I'm just putting up on screen here. So this is the luxury car market, and what Elon actually revealed is that the luxury car market seems to have less choice or EV adoption compared to the segment in green there.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, so that's basically the green segment is a pure battery electric,
mm,
and the purple is like pure ICE, if you think about it. So it's really kind of like the non-purple is everything that's like electrified in some way, whether that's hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or extended range, or just pure battery electric. The green is the pure battery electric, but just like you can kind of see like ICE is like roughly around the penetration rates like of like uh, it's like 30% for like non-ICE vehicles, and then
yeah.
whereas like in the premium market, I think it was a previous slide. I think it was like much closer to 10, I believe.
Mm.
Yeah, or even less than that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
This is so unique. I think most of the world is like US, where EVs start from premium and trickle down.
All right.
What's the insight or the story behind this?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I think so. I think there's a couple things. So, like, I think that the thing you have to understand, I think in China relative to other places, is like, is one, certainly it is a developing country, so there is a people are a lot affordability, like at the top end as a percentage of total population is a lot less. And then I think the second thing is that actually the supply chain in China is quite good, so the ability to make uh, like a cheap EV actually isn't a hurdle, unlike in many other countries.
Hmm.
One, because the supply chain is good. B, they have like the manufacturing capacity and expertise. And then three, that obviously the labor cost is a lot lower over there. So I think it's just a combination of all these three factors. It's like, okay, like it makes sort of affordable EVs. Oftentimes, like that's actually how they started. Sort of if you look at like 5, 10 years ago, like the first type of EVs weren't these high end ones, were kind of these like what you call like kind of like subcompact, like
Golf
uh,
carts.
yeah, golf carts basically. They just like kind of like, oh, we're gonna put a motor, put a battery in it. There's no like liquid cooling or anything like any of those technology, but like it's cheap, and then that's basically how it got a foothold and developed. And then over time, probably the last 7 years or so, um, is sort of when the supply chain and the overall manufacturing capabilities really leveled up, and they started going at the premium high end market with companies like Neo or Li Auto or XCOM.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the world's largest car market. It's got the world's largest EV sales. The EV penetration is really high, but something's up. You call out that the Japanese manufacturers don't seem to be making EVs or providing EVs in China. Is this, do you think, something that's intentional or what's holding them back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of it. I think it's the I think that's just the ethos of the Japanese in some ways. Uh, I don't. It's always one that I think sort of like that I couldn't fully wrap my head around and understand. But certainly, I think Toyota is probably leading the way there, and because Toyota's leading the way, kind of like everybody else has to kind of follow through. Um, uh, because like Toyota is the big brother in Japan, and because like Toyota doesn't believe in it, or doesn't really believe in it, then everybody else follows along. The politicians follow along. So I think there's like from multiple layers, whether it's from the government layer, kind of putting in incentives to foster the adoption of the EV industry, or from just the companies themselves trying to move in that direction. I think both are very committed essentially to kind of like hybrids and plug-in hybrids, and because they think it's like a, kind of the more rational thing to do. At least that's how I'm reading it. But this is like I think in 10 years we're going to look back and this is going to be a classic sort of innovator's dilemma, Harvard business case, of like what went wrong with these OEMs. But yeah.
Agree. I'll take this as a short pause just to give a shout out to everyone who's saying hi to us in the live stream chat. I believe you can see them as well, Elon. Hi, Zuma. Hi, Sol. Hello, Alexandra. Hello, Simon. Thank you, everyone, for the support. So, as Elon's calling out about the Japanese automakers, it sounds like Toyota isn't just impacting or influencing itself, but the nation more broadly as well, because they are kind of like a leader or a standard setter on what goes on in Japan automotive industry. What I mean by that is that if, let's say, Toyota goes heavy in EVs, Nissan and
Mhm.
Honda would almost definitely follow.
Yeah.
But if they don't, if let's say the new CEO is still saying hydrogen is still something very important to us, so we'll begrudgingly make more EVs, but it's not the main thing we're going to do. And that may
Mhm.
also impact how Honda and Nissan approach things. It's
Right.
probably less likely that Honda will say we're going to go 100% EV.
Yeah,
What's your
I think that's probably true. I also think that like probably I think in their mind it's like uh like I think that I think for the most part, like they've invested in hydrogen a lot, so they actually accumulated a lot of patents. I think one stat that I've heard is like, I think it's like I never verified, but so if I get it wrong, don't blame me. But it's like something like 90% of all like hydrogen patents like came from Toyota. So like I think they have a sort of a lot there, and they just like, oh, this is like a, if in the event in the future for whatever reason, like if the world shifts that way, then I think we're gonna have a huge advantage, or leg up or something. But whereas like they have a less of advantage in the EV space. So I think that's part of the reason. I think the other part of the reason is just the I think it's just like it's very hard to admit that you're wrong, particularly for a big company like that. And you know, I want them to. I honestly I want them to succeed. My family have owned Hondas for a very long time, but yeah, so far they're definitely struggling.
My mom loves Honda. She's been driving it for decades as well.
Yeah.
Shout out from Sofa in the live stream chat saying you might think it's hilarious, but in Louisiana, there's a law against buying direct to consumer. You can't buy a Tesla in the state.
Yeah.
However, you can buy one in Texas.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's very U.S. is very bizarre with these franchise rules. It's not just Texas, and there's Texas at the very least you can like service your Teslas.
Yeah.
And then there are some states in the U.S. where you're not even allowed to service EVs directly to consumer. So oftentimes like at Rivian, like you end up actually having to do these kind of like workarounds where like you have to bring your Rivian to a neighboring state to get repaired, and it's very bizarre.
It's insane. I guess one small good thing about China is that the policies are a little bit more consistent, for better and worse. One thing I love about your insights, Elon, is you actually break it down and go more granular. Rather than blanket statements like Tesla's market share is going up or going down, you actually look at the price segments. So I believe one of your analysis here was talking about at the mass market segment, the 200 to 300,000 yuan, Model Y and Model 3 dominate very significantly.
Yeah, I think that was also, I think, part of it. That was like I think I intuitively knew that was true, but it was like kind of just like how big their dominance are, with the Model Y, particularly with the Model Y. I think like if you just look at the Model Y, I think it's like much closer to like 60% in the SUV segment, in this price. I think like if you were to kind of look at a bunch of other sort of competitors, pure battery electric competitors, I think on this list, I think you can kind of understand why. So I think a lot of competitions in China have largely focused on either the lower end segment where they started, right? Like the economy cars and whatnot, as well as like recently they started going really high end. So like trying to eat essentially the BMWs, Mercedes, Audi's market share. So like this middle segment, the generation of product perhaps is probably still like one generation behind. If the Han EVs are like maybe outside of the seal itself, like the Han EV is it's an older platform. The ID series are older platforms, and I think just like at least in this particular moment in time in this price segment, like the Teslas that definitely offer the best value. I think a combination of brand, sort of intelligence of the vehicles, and certainly like charging infrastructure are all kind of like things that kind of go in Tesla's favor, and as a result, they kind of like dominate this segment today. Time will tell whether that changes or not, but that's certainly true today.
Curious to get your insight, Elon. A brand like Tesla, is it perceived the same as other foreign brands in China, or is there a different perception of Tesla in China?
No, there's definitely different. Like particularly a lot, like there's definitely a difference. Like they're born as a pure EV brand, so like nobody really compares them to like the other like international brands like let's say called BMWs or Audis or Mercedes or kind of like these other. So I think there is an internationally like so international brands. I think there's Tesla and then there's everybody else. And then I think and then they yeah I mean but like domestic brands is they certainly compare well with the upstarts and stuff. Yeah.
How about consumer psyche? So we see a lot of reports, US, Western Europe, brand loyalty for Tesla, brand satisfaction for Tesla is high. How about in China? While people may recognize the brand, is brand loyalty as sticky as high as US, for instance?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, I think there was like a. I have to pull it up later. Maybe I can share. I don't have it in front of me, but certainly, basically, I think there was a brand study done a while ago by a consulting firm in China, specifically looking at this question, and I think the end result was basically it was BYD, Tesla, and then NIO were the three companies that people had the most fondness of, as well as the most loyal to. I think for BYD, I think a large part of it is because they've been at it for so long, and they are like a domestic champion. So I think there's definitely a little bit of a national pride there. And then I think in the case of NIO, it's because like they've heavily invested in a premium brand, and I think that and I think certainly they had really great reputations in China. And then for the case of Tesla, they were literally I think Tesla, because they entered China and then had the factory, I think they definitely helped level up the supply chain. And because they're like the top dogs for such a long time, there's in China there's definitely fondness for them as well.
Very good insight. There's a question on chat by Daniel. Do you think that Model 3 refresh will boost sales again? So for the audience, for context, like Model 3 prices in China are probably one of the cheapest in the world. It's like 33,000 US dollars.
Yeah. So the question is, do you think the Model 3 refresh will boost sales again? I think possibly. But honestly, looking at what the rumor refreshes are, it seems like it's pretty light. So like I'm not super confident in that, particularly like as there's a lot more competition in the space in the next sort of 12 to 18 months. I do think that there's generally a trend of getting after bigger vehicles in China as people get wealthier. It's kind of like the Americanization of the consumer behavior. It's like people just like bigger and bigger cars. So I think you also see the same trend with consumer adopting for the Y instead of the 3.
That's right.
Yeah.
We see the Model Y outselling the 3 by 2 to 3 times in most markets. So it makes us wonder, like, is this a Model 3 problem or a sedan problem? Like maybe Model 3 is gaining share of sedans, but the total pie of sedans is just shrinking relative to the rest of the car market. Do you see it playing out?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, like relatively speaking, the SUV market is definitely growing faster than the sedan. I think historically it's about 50-50. I think now, recently, I have to check the numbers again, but it's probably closer to like 60-40.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another related question. This time is all the way in the top end by Simon. Model S and Model X refresh. How well do you think it'll be received? And also any timelines we see for delivery?
Yeah, I think they are starting to deliver on them if I remember. Like I actually specifically looked into this because I was also interested. I think when you look at the really high, because it is very expensive, it's about $1 million. Particularly the Plaid is over $1 million RMB. It's definitely like it's definitely for the rich, for the well off in the country. So when you look at sort of essentially like variety of kind of vehicles that in that segment, a lot of it's honestly dominated by the limousines. So the S-Class, the Maybachs, the 7 Series, the Panamera. Certainly, there's a small portion of it that's like sports cars. Whereas like I would consider Plaid more of like a sports sedan. So like maybe they could take some shares from like the Panamera, so type Taycan. Um, but I think it's a very different segment than like the S class or the Maybachs in 7 Series. I don't think they're like direct competitors. So I sort of like I guess that's a long-winded way of I think saying that like if they can get to something like 1,000 a quarter, like the Taycan, I think that'd be a pretty big win.
Now, 1,000 a quarter, it's relative. Like in Singapore, Tesla sells 1,000 cars per year. That's a big deal. But in
Yeah.
China, Tesla is now selling about 18,000 cars per week. 18,000 cars per week. So that 1,000 a quarter is basically about, someone do the maths and share in the chat. 18,000 cars per week versus 1,000 per quarter for S and X. Maybe that's what, 2-3% of total volumes. So it's not going to be a volume maker.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's probably more of a brand halo effect on the rest of the brands. I think that's probably the more important piece. Because like I do think that for Tesla, there is a risk as it goes down market, it becomes more of just like a cheap mass market brand, whereas like I don't think that's actually true. And certainly the level of investment they make in technology is not. But with that said, like I think that's probably a challenge that they have to sort of overcome in the coming years. Is like how do we basically get mass adoption while at the same time still retain desirability, which is like historically and kind of other luxury goods has been a very difficult exercise.
So we've got 3 and Y in the middle. We've got S and X all the way on top at the million yuan level. How about Cybertruck? So we know that US is a huge truck market, it's largest in the world. Thailand is the world's second largest truck market. I just got back from Thailand. But we don't really hear much about trucks in China. What's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think truck it's like kind of very niche and new segment. I think China now. I think there's starting to be a couple that pop up. At least certainly there's definitely trucks in China, but very very much for commercial use. It's very rare for trucks as a sort of an end consumer product in China. But I think it's like particularly I think with how popular Rivian is and kind of like these kind of adventure vehicles. Like I think some automakers like Geely, they recently launched a brand called Radar that and that's like starting to kind of tap into this market, which I think is kind of cool. But very much, I think it does not have a truck culture sort of in China the same way that there is in the US.
Interesting. So I guess among the existing 1.2, 1.3 million Cybertruck pre-orders, very, very few would come from China.
Yeah. At least at the time, at current time, I'd be really surprised if Cybertruck sells well in China. I think predominantly it'd be I think probably like 70 or 80% of the sales would probably be in the US. But US is obviously a huge market, and I think like F-150 sell almost 1 million units in the US. Not the last 2 years, but like at its peak, we're selling like almost 1 million units. So that's which is a very hefty amount, and I think they'd be very happy if the Cybertruck gets there.
Yep. Initial production volume for Cybertruck, they're looking at up to 250,000 at full ramp, at least for this Giga Austin alone. So we'll see how that plays out. I know a lot of friends.
Do you think that the Cybertruck will sell well? Just out of curiosity.
Yes, I believe so. I've just spoken to so many owners who privately, not just publicly, say, I want a Cybertruck. I'm going to get a Cybertruck. I mean, some because it's flashy, others because they really see the utility in it. So my confidence level in Cybertruck's quite high. But again, I'm not a truck person. I really want to go and experience it. So I hope to actually just sit down with it. You know, like how people who invest in Tesla, like Dave Lee, he actually wrote a Tesla Model S in 2012 before getting it. or even like Alexandra Merce recently, who's also listening to this. She tried like a Tesla before really getting the product. I think us seeing the Cybertruck pictures and actually experiencing one live firsthand is something else. Have you got a chance to see a live Cybertruck, Elon?
Unfortunately, not. I know a few friends that have, but I personally have not seen one.
So I think that's a different experience. I want to see one firsthand and really make a call on that. But what really moves the needle in China is the market at the 200,000 RMB price point and below. And that's where your analysis shows that BYD just clearly dominates.
Yeah, exactly. And this is that's the segment that they've sort of been at sort of the longest and worked the longest. Yeah, I mean they have something like ridiculous, like 40% essentially market share, sort of in that segment today. And then even in the premium segment, like the like a pure BEV market, like it's Neo and Zeekr, and like and BMW is starting to actually do reasonably well there, but really, really it's like I think in that segment, unless something massively changes, I think it's just like these companies will just continue to eat into the internal combustion, the traditional ICE vehicle share. Though I think it's like it just takes a little longer than I think most people expect, because at the end of the day, like I think it's actually like in the cheaper segment, I think people are probably a little bit younger, and as well as like the fuel prices are quite high, I think, in China. So I think there's a little bit more willingness to switch to EVs to save on the fuel costs, and that cost, they're much more cost conscious in that way. Whereas I think in the premium segment, they have a lot, like people who own these cars, like this is not the only car they own. They probably have like 2 or 3 cars. So it kind of like, is it a big deal? Sure. I mean, but is it a consideration? Sure, but is it a big deal? Probably not. So I do think that like there's probably a little bit of a delay, I think, in just like adoption, because of people are more conservative in that way.
Good points. So I want to just address the live stream audience. There's 44 of you right now. I want to just focus on what Elon put here. Specifically, Tesla essentially has 0% market share of a very big part of China's car market at below 200,000 yuan. That is basically about below 30,000 US dollars. Share in the chat. Do you think this is a good thing or a bad thing for you who are a Tesla investor? Now, the way I see it, Tesla has 0% market share here, but they are selling more EVs than BYD today. They're selling more EVs than BYD globally, while they have a 0% market share of this segment. So Elon, my question is, what happens if Tesla launches that 25,000 US dollar next gen car in China?
Yeah, I think it'll solely be assuming that it sort of has the same level of disruption that it had, like the Model 3 had on the industry. I certainly think that it'll have at the very least it'll have the attention of everyone. I think looking at sort of like the previous Tesla Investor Day, I think there's like some hints of it, perhaps from a manufacturing standpoint. It'll be much more similar to the Cybertruck than probably a traditional Model 3 that we're kind of like the look and feel that we're used to. So like I do think that like at the very it'll have huge the attention of everyone, and I think everyone's going to give Tesla a look. Now, like I don't know in terms of like what they are currently thinking in terms of like specs and everything. So it's like it's a little hard to say how well exactly they'll do there, because particularly in China, like people are very much like value conscious, and sort of like the brand legacy itself, those are nice, but like what does this product can do for me today is and like the value for money are oftentimes like like seems to be the way, at least today, how car buyers shopping EVs think about purchase decisions.
What is interesting is that precisely to this point, Tesla has a design center in Shanghai to design this next gen car. So this $25,000 car is being designed in Shanghai. So hopefully they may take into account like what's important for car buyers at that price segment.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think they'll do a good job. Like I think they'll do a good job at it. Like I'm pretty confident that I think it'll be a good vehicle. Just like because the infrastructure is there, the talent is there, and certainly if history sort of is any indicator, at the very least, it'll be a very 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 competitive product. So yeah.
On top of that, so I've got a lot of Chinese friends in different companies working in China. Like when we take a look at products like the iPhone, it says like designed in California, manufactured in China.
Mm-hmm.
But the next gen car is an opportunity for China to say designed in China, manufactured in China. And that sense of ownership, the sense of pride is very strong among most of my Chinese friends as well. Of course, Giga Mexico will be making this next gen car, but
Mm-hmm.
Tesla also mentioned that they are going to have another Giga factory in parallel making this next gen car. Asia Pacific is a huge market for this price point. So whether it's in Shanghai or Indonesia or this part of the world, will get it as well. We talk about price so much, and the industry seems to be talking a lot about price as well. So there have been a lot of articles recently on how like Tesla is starting a price war, destroying some car makers. You mentioned in your own analysis as well, Elon, that some car manufacturers, even ICE car companies, are offering discount as much as 40% off the suggested retail price. What's going on? What's your view?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think the certainly the price war right now is I think it's pretty crazy, and I think we'll have some, like, I think that as this headline says, some profound implications for the industry in the next 12 to 24 months. Certainly, I think consolidation is part of it. I think some bankruptcy might happen, or like some brand just exiting the market entirely, particularly with like the JV, the joint venture brands. Just some of them aren't selling that well. Like take example, I think um, I think Mazda, like things like Mazda, Mitsubishi, um, uh, and like Subaru and Infinity, like those brands just like they sell very few vehicles in China, and they've been on a precipitous decline. And I think they're going to like really struggle, I think, that next year, because one, they don't have like a great, their brand isn't particularly like compelling. Like there's no like brand desirability for those vehicles, and then two, they don't have a great EV portfolio. So I think a combination of those, I think, will make things really tough for them.
So when we think about how this plays out, Elon, it's one thing like if Volkswagen, Ford, GM, they exit China, they don't do well in China.
Yeah.
But what happens if it starts impacting the big local auto companies like BYD? There was recently a statement put out together by the China Association of Automobile Manufacturers saying that
Mhm.
there needs to be a return to normal. You cannot disrupt the sector. These tactics shouldn't be long term.
Yeah.
If it starts impacting large Chinese car manufacturers, do you see a chance or a risk of government stepping in? And how could this impact Tesla?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think this is like fairly speculative at this point, but we can certainly speculate. Like I think I think there's actually sort of like mental models for this in like kind of other price wars that happen in China. So like with like Uber and Didi, or kind of like these uh, kind of bike sharing kind of price wars, or scaling wars. Really, like the I think this won't stop until someone really gets hurt. I don't think it's I don't know if the government necessarily will come in. In fact, government's actually stepping in the other way right now. So they're helping a lot of their local OEMs, sort of incentivizing a lot of the OEMs to give discounts, and that's why you can see that those discounts are so large.
Mm,
Partially, it's because of sort of like local government backing them, um, so that the OEMs don't foot essentially the entire bill. But yeah, like I think it'll be very hard to pull back now, and then I think it'll but with that, I think would there be, I don't think it'll be like more price cuts from here, more extreme price cuts from here, but I don't I think it'll be like, take for example April. Do I expect the prices to go back up? Like,
yeah.
I'm not so sure. I think those will last longer than that, until it's like someone can't take it anymore, or the group can't take it anymore, and then becomes and they essentially bow out of the market. And at that point, it's like, okay, like we can have a reset. That's kind of like my current view today. But these things change very quickly, so what I said could be completely wrong.
It is very fluid. Usually, in most markets, when prices go down, demand goes up. But what we're seeing in China is that despite quite sharp price cuts by many companies,
Yeah.
car sales are down by 20% year on year. What's driving this? Is this a broader economy thing, or is there something else that we are not aware of, Elon?
Yeah, I mean, I actually think there's probably a few factors here. So in January and February, so one, certainly kind of like there was a pull forward of demand into last year because um, at least on the EV side, the subsidies were expiring. So I think that's part of it.
Yes.
Um, I think the second part is, I do think like that macro is a big that definitely has an impact, particularly with COVID. I think one, if you look at the real estate sector, the the like real estate, prices are starting to come down in a lot of the major markets. Now it hasn't come down a lot, but just the fact that it has come down because like real estate is such a big part um, of people's wealth in China, that I think it becomes, people are just like less confident about the future. It's like, oh, like what if my real estate goes down 10%, and like my like $10 million home, all of a sudden I lose $1 million. So like, okay, maybe I should like be careful on my car purchase. Maybe instead of buying a like a 400,000 RMB car, I'll just buy like a 300,000. And then for certain people in the lower end, it's like, oh, maybe initially I was buying a car, and now I won't buy a car. I think those things are true. I think the third thing actually is like it's actually having kind of a reverse effect with the price drops. That um, it's like the wait and see crowd basically. It's like, oh, because there's so many of these price drops, everybody's doing them. Like, I
Yeah.
don't want to be the guy that like buys something and then
Yeah.
like another price drop happens, and then like I get like, it's kind of like catching a falling knife if you're buying stocks or whatever.
That's right.
So there's a lot of like kind of wait and see crowd. So like to that extent, I think Li Auto started this, and I think a bunch of other companies have followed. It's like, okay, like we're going to give you a price guarantee that if our car drop prices again in the next 90 days, like you're going to get the lower price. I think that was actually a pretty smart move. But yeah, I think those are kind of like the three factors I think are happening that is kind of like causing the drop in demand.
A cool fun fact for international audience when Elon was talking about like housing prices and how important housing is to like someone's finance. In China, it's not just your finance; it's like your life. Almost like your dating life revolves around getting a home as well. Like you need to have an apartment to Shanghai before you start dating someone. Otherwise, people won't marry you as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think and particularly relative to people's disposable income, housing prices in China, particularly in tier one cities, are much higher. I
Yeah.
think but back in napkin math, I think it's like Shanghai for the average person if they are able to afford a home, they basically have to work for 75 years without eating, essentially, to be able to buy one. That's like how extreme it is.
Insane. We definitely need some Tesla bots there. So the market keeps on changing. In Q4 last year, we were seeing like BYD going from strength to strength. People were wondering what's going on at Tesla in China despite price cuts. Didn't seem to be moving that much. But right now, the recent news and data in China, people are saying that Tesla are looking to be having a record quarter in China. Like they just need, I think, another 18,000 deliveries to get a
Yeah,
record quarter. There's another like week and a half more to go.
yeah.
So China, Tesla seems to be doing very well. Like, do you have any personal perspective beyond this to share here?
Yeah, I think certainly, I think anecdotally that's also been true. I think that the reason we were, like I do think that like every quarter kind of like people kind of get hung up on this, like because the beginning of quarters tends to be lower, and then people catch up at the end of the quarter. So there's always kind of this like, is it actually going to catch up or not? Like, are we going to see the demand there? So I think at the moment, from everything that I've seen and heard, like with the price drops, like I think Tesla I would say have a healthy balance of production and demand in the country. I don't think they have a surplus or anything or a shortfall. I wouldn't say that they're demand constrained or supply constrained. But I think there's a healthy balance right now.
Hmm.
So like I think it'll be tough though. Like if you look more like 12, 18 months, like without introduction of new models, for the growth to continue, I think will be tough. It'd be more of an uphill climb. But I think at the moment to kind of like getting kind of like surpassing the previous record and sort of like setting the pace that it is today, I think it's very doable.
Agree. You bring a good point. Like this growth may continue for let's say 12 to 6 to 12 months, but beyond that, we need the next gen model. Curious again, just your perspective. At the price point below 200,000 yuan, which is where BYD is very strong, especially on EVs, what would scare BYD in Tesla's new vehicle? What
Uh,
compelling feature a Tesla's new vehicle could have that would really scare the rest of the industry?
I mean, I honestly, I think it's like I think there's like if you were talking about consumer features, I think really there is only really one, which is like if somehow Tesla does like actually fulfill its promise on the full self driving front, I think that would be incredibly disruptive. But like I'm personally not as very bullish on that happening.
Hmm.
Particularly in China, because like Tesla's software stack is at the moment is very very sort of like overfitting for North America.
Yes.
So I'm less bullish on that. So like I don't think actually there's that much that would scare BYD. I think BYD very much sees themselves as equals in China as Tesla, and they're going to bring it too. So I think that's like probably one also another misconception that like in China, like like Tesla still have a huge technological advantage to everybody else. I think that's like there is an advantage for sure, particularly with manufacturing and power electronics. But I think that delta is much smaller now, and I think um, to the point where I think the consumer the difference is small enough where the consumer cares less. It's less of a factor when validating EVs today. So from a purely from a spec standpoint.
I agree. We've seen recent tweets on like the Huawei Harmony OS for cars. That seems to be pretty smooth. Most of my friends who are living in Shanghai, expats and locals, are saying the local car brands have not just good software, but even the hardware quality, the build is solid as well. So
Yeah.
I'm probably sharing it on the channel the first time, but I'm going to make a trip to Shanghai in end of October. I'm really going to try all the different local car brands, all the robo taxis, maybe even visit BYD headquarters or office in Shenzhen if I get a chance to. There's a related question in the chat on EVs. So Raymond's asking, Electric Viking is saying that the Chinese government has a rule that this July they will try to like inhibit or stop the sales of non-EVs. Have you heard this? And what's the impact on the inventory build up for Legacy Auto?
Yeah, I think that's part of the reason why also the bigger discount happened. To be like, I'm still also kind of like digesting this and learning a little bit more about it as well. So like, I don't have a ton of like insightful things to say there, but I just it is. There's like kind of basically you could like my understanding of it. There are new rules that are coming in July that is going to be sort of essentially prohibitive to kind of existing ICE vehicles to sell through. And as a result of that, it's like, okay, well, all the OEMs kind of have to clear inventory in the first part of the year, and they just got to get rid of them because it's better to get something than nothing, basically. But I don't know the specifics of like the rules and regulations right now. That's still something I'm like studying.
Raymond, if you have any more details, please share more details in the chat. Because what's going to happen, especially to the Japanese automakers like Toyota, Honda, and Nissan in China, that's going to be really hard hit for them if they don't even have major EV models for sale at scale. Another question from the audience is Simon's asking, by 2030, how would China's EV market be like? So for context, like Norway is really like 90% battery electric vehicle. In some big cities like Shanghai, I think we are already at 41% battery electric vehicle, some months even higher. But how do you see this playing out in China?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like it'll probably get to like if you look at Norway, I think it went from like 30% to like 80, 90% in the span of 5 years or something. I think it'll take longer for China just because it's a bigger market, it's more geographically diverse, whereas like Norway, it's like it's like fairly homogeneous. And charging infrastructures are very easy to build out. Everybody's standard of living is very high, and and those things are just not true in China. So I think it'll probably be somewhere by the 2030. It'll probably be somewhere around like 70% sort of penetration rate, and I think from there, like 70-90% will probably take longer than people think because of the long tail. But I think like right now we're in the steep part of the S curve. So I think getting from 30% to like 50%, I could potentially see in the next couple of years. So yeah, that's kind of like my view on like kind of overall adoption, which is still like phenomenally fast for a country that's of that size.
Again, this is the world's largest car market by far, selling 26 million cars. Even if it's just 70% EV adoption, 70% of 26 million is 18 million cars. That's more EVs sold than the entire US car market.
Yeah, exactly.
More EVs sold than the entire US car market.
Yeah.
We talked about earlier how like trucks like Cybertruck may not be a big thing in China, but I want to talk about another Tesla product that very few people relate to China, and that's the Tesla Semi. China is actually the world's largest semi-truck market. It is the logistics hub of the world in many ways. It is the supply chain of the world. There are far more semi-trucks in China than in US. I'm curious, do you think there's an opportunity for Tesla Semi in China?
I think there's an opportunity for sure. I just don't think that's a priority for them right now. Like, so I think it's like, I think if you were to kind of like, if you were someone and Tesla have decision power, maybe you're Elon, and say like, what are some key priorities for the market that we need to tackle? I think like, getting the lower cost sort of mass market vehicle out is probably much higher on that priority list than semi, because I think that the semi market I think moves a little bit slower and a little bit more cost conscious. So like even if if you have a better product, then I think it's easier to get adoption. Whereas like in the consumer market, like kind of building the brand and you kind of like really for a first mover advantage, or at the very least, like you really have to be in the market like early, otherwise like you end up getting locked out. So
Yeah,
like I think that's probably where they would spend their focus today. There's only so many things that they can tackle at once. That's how I would think about it. But
I
um,
agree.
I do think that there is an opportunity for sure.
I fully agree. If we think of China, like the Tesla Semi, the battery pack size, I'll just pulling it up, is 850 kilowatt hours. How many next gen Teslas can you make? Probably 20. You could sell 20 next gen cars for every one Tesla Semi, maybe even more. So I think, especially with the missions focused on accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy, there's 20 ICE cars off the road. So I agree that the next gen car will be a focus.
Yeah.
Elon, let's
And
take a few. Yes.
yeah, and I think one of the comments I mentioned it too. They have to kind of scale the semi here in the U.S. too, right? So
Yeah,
I think that's a very good point too. Just the fact that like I think the deliveries have been few and far between. I think with Pepsi. So I think there's still a bunch of things they have to figure out over there.
I agree. There are a couple audience questions on related to Megapack, so let's take them one by one. Okay, first we have Jose. I heard from one YouTuber that Tesla may be building Megapacks in Shanghai. Any insights here? Is there a market for battery storage in China? What's your sense?
I think this is a huge. I think all battery automakers are building battery storage. So CATL, BYD, kind of, and like Asphalt, and essentially everyone that you think of have a product there. Though admittedly, I don't follow that space nearly as much as I do on the consumer auto side. So yeah, I'm probably not the best person to give insights here, but I just know it's going to be insanely competitive because you know uh, because literally everybody's doing it, and I'm not sure if there is necessarily as big of a like a technological advantage there as Tesla have perhaps in vehicle manufacturing.
So I think that's an interesting thing for us to do more research on. What I think Tesla said recently is Megapack isn't just a stack of batteries; it's also the brains behind it, the software. Just like how Tesla bought Optimus isn't just a robot like Boston Dynamics; it's actually
Yeah,
smart, can learn.
yeah,
So Tesla has software features like Auto Bidder that does a more intelligent allocation of energy, peak, non-peak usage. That's
right,
something that the world hasn't really talked much on. I don't think it's valued by most institutional investors as well. It's probably underappreciated by most of us because energy is still percentage-wise a very small part of Tesla's business, but it
right.
is growing faster than automotive right now. There is a related question. Again, if you have a perspective, are there any megapack competitors from CATL or BYD that you notice?
Um, Uh, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure they all have competitive products, and it's not just CATL or BYD. If you look at CLB, Asphalt, I think all of them have a comparable product to the
Mm.
Megapack.
So I'm just doing a browse of BYD's website. Let me just show it. So BYD has their own like batch energy storage systems as well. Now, how does it compare with Tesla Megapack? I do not know the answer. I'm looking forward to some people doing a deep dive and revealing this. But I think the short of it is probably everyone in the EV space, if they have the capacity, they are thinking of energy storage and also branching across the rest of the ecosystem too.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think the interest on this will continue to grow, especially I think people will be very surprised next month when Tesla releases their quarterly earnings, how much Tesla energy will be growing. Because the new Lathrop mega factory is going to basically like 6.5 times their battery manufacturing capacity. It's
Mm,
huge.
mm. Yeah,
Okay.
and it doesn't seem like a big factory either, so the density is quite high. So
Hmm.
um, yeah, so yeah, I'm curious to kind of see what transpires. I'm also learning on that space too. I'm much less of a I'm not an expert in the auto space either, but I'm even more of a non-expert in the energy storage space.
Thank you so much. Shout out to everyone else in the live stream audience. Got 71 of you. Do you have any other questions for Elon or I? We're happy to take them. We got one more from Raymond. Let's hear this. He's asking, are Chinese EV customers aware of Tom Zhu's achievements, including his growing role at Tesla?
I think they're very aware. I think he's someone that everybody, at least sort of everybody's very proud of, including myself. Like it's not easy to be literally like honestly like I think he's essentially been sort of in the back like and Tesla will never admit this. I think but I think he's basically been minted the next CEO of Tesla after Elon and yeah, I mean, I think that like to get to where he is today for Asian for a Chinese, I think it's not easy, particularly in a Western company like a top-notch company like Tesla. So I think they're very well aware of that, and they're very proud of him.
What's less known is that Tom is actually a New Zealand citizen. And he's also, well, we've seen many of his interviews in Mandarin and Chinese. Recently at Tesla Investor Day, he's also articulated a lot of clear thoughts about Gigafactory expansion in English as well. So I think he's poised to be a very strong global leader at Tesla. There are many good leaders at Tesla right now, like Drew Baglino. There's a range of them. We saw the whole panel of good leaders in Tesla Investor Day. And I think Martin Veka was saying that there's actually a lot more good leaders. He just couldn't bring up everyone because of time constraints, even though it was a 4-hour Investor Day. Investor Day didn't feel like it was catered to normal investors. Felt like a very different audience. Simon
Yeah,
is saying, great seeing Tom Zhu doing well. It's like winning an Oscar.
yeah. I mean, it's certainly true. It's definitely an achievement that's worth celebrating.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. Thank you again, Elon, for just your insights, your perspective. You're sharing this. By the way, audience, this is Elon's first live stream. First time doing a live stream.
Hope,
Yes?
yes. Hopefully, it was people. Yeah, it was fun. So fun for me. So thank you for having me.
So if you want to show your love and support for Elon, if you like this, please follow Elon on Twitter. You find at YILUNZH. You'll find more coverage on EVs. He spent 8 years in the auto industry, including a few years as a product manager at Rivian. So maybe one day we'll talk about Rivian. I know you have some tweets about that as well. But thank you
Yeah,
so much, Elon.
yeah. No, thank you, Darren. This was fun. Appreciate it, and appreciate for
It's been a
everyone
joy.
listening in.
Been enjoying having you. It's been enjoying having all of you in the audience asking great questions. Thank you for all the love and support. We're ending this broadcast now. Click subscribe to stay updated to more live streams on Tesla. Take care, everyone. Good night to our friends in Asia Pacific. Good morning to all of you in the US.
All right, take care.